My name is Christopher Xu, and this is my interview number 6 for my C++ class. So in the first line of our code, we use the preprocessor directive uh, and include the header file iostream. This allows us to use input and output objects such as cin that gets input from the user and cout that displays output. Next, using namespace standard basically imports the namespace library into the scope of our current program. That allows us to use objects such as cin and cout without having to use the std : modifier right here. Next, the first of my three functions is the user input function. This function doesn't return anything since it is a void function. It has two parameters, both of type double, and as you can see here, they are also passed by reference values. The reason they are passed by reference values is because since they are user input, and since in my main function, I initialize n1 and n2 without any values, these the void user input function is where I'll be getting those values from. Without pass by reference, these will default to some random value, not making the rest of my function calls produce incorrect results. That's why we have to include pass by reference so it can modify the value n1 and n2 values here. So what the user input value does is first it displays enter two numbers separated by a space. Then it assigns those two values to num1 and num2 respectively. Next, in our calculation function, it returns. You can see here it returns a double. It also has two parameters double that are both of type double, num1 and num2. What it does is very simple. All it does is return the value of num1 multiplied by num2. Next, finally, our last function is the printout function. It is also void, which means it doesn't return anything. It has three parameters, all of type double, num1, num2, and the product. All it does is just first prints out an aesthetic line to separate it from other values. The program I printed out, and the other line, it basically prints out num1 x, which represents multiplication, num1 x num2 equals the product. It basically tells us num1 times num2 equals a certain product. Yeah. Finally, in our main, I try to make this as concise as possible. I initialize three variables, num1, n1, n2, and result of type double. They are not initialized to any value currently. I get those values by using the user input function. Since it's passed by reference value, any value I input in user input will be passed to n1 and n2 over here. Result is assigned to the value of calculation, the calculation function, which I input n1 and n2 into. Finally, the print out function, I basically input n1, n2, and result as the parameters, and all they do is just print out n1 times n2 is equal to whatever product we have. And then we return 0 for a successful completion of our program. Let me demonstrate my program running. And there are two numbers separated by space. Let's do 1 and then space 9. Enter. And yeah, here that is correctly multiplied our two numbers. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.